Welcome to the EcoParent Podcast Network. I'm Sam, the founder of EcoParent Magazine. If you listened to any of the first 5 episodes of this show, then you're familiar with the tumultuous history of EcoParent's early years. Don't worry, I won't subject you to that again. Instead, I just want to remind you of why we do this. It's for you. EcoParent has always been for you. The parents who go the extra mile to do a little better for their kids, their families, and for the planet. But the relationship is symbiotic. EcoParent also needs you. So if you like these podcasts and find that they add value to your life, if they inspire you or make you feel more connected, please share them with your friends. Reviews are also a great way to tell the listening platform that the podcast is worth recommending. So, if you're not busy driving a kid here or there, or making supper, or any of the other awesome parent stuff that you do, please take the time to pause this recording and give it a quick review, or text it to a friend.
Dad, can we record the outro?
Sure.
One of your main tools for building resilience is food. And that's why we've dedicated this entire podcast to talking about feeding families. How can we use food to support our children's health? And what are some of the things we tend to fall into with food that are actually interfering with their resilience? The Feeding Families podcast is all about nutrition for kids. We bring you new ideas and inspiration for your kitchen and answers to your food questions so you can overcome the very real, very frustrating food-related challenges so many parents are trying to figure out. I'm your host, Jess Sherman, family wellness educator, author, practitioner of functional and holistic nutrition, and mother. I want you to develop unwavering confidence in the choices you make every day, so let's get into feeding families. Hello, families. Thank you so much for tuning in to our last episode of the season. As we wrap up our first season of the Feeding Families podcast, I wanted to take some time to pull it together for you, like really do kind of a roundup of what we've done here so far and help give you a bit of a container to put all this information in. Because it's been a tough year, right? It's been so tough. It continues to be tough, particularly for parents, I think. Maybe that's too much of a broad statement for me to say, but it's been really hard for us as parents. Stress is through the roof, and I see it in myself. I also see it in other parents, and I also see it in kids, in my own kids and in their friends, particularly in kids. Any teacher that I talk to, anyone who works with kids, anyone who works in healthcare, the kids are having it rough right now. And partly I think that's a reflection of what's going on with parents, but partly it's because they were not super robustly resilient going into this. And now we are really seeing the cracks. Honestly, parents who are listening out there, I think we have entered into a new era of parenting. Those of you who are parenting alongside me, I'm in my 40s. We are in an era of parenting where we need to carefully consider resilience, right? Resilience is what I wrote my book about, Raising Resilience, our capacity to not only tolerate stress, but to grow from stress, to move through stress and grow from it, to bend without breaking. What I've dedicated my last 5 or 6 years ago, since I wrote my book, is explaining to parents, identifying for parents, the forces that are at play that both support and interfere with the resilience of our kids, because let's face it, that's what we want, right? We want kids who are emotionally resilient, emotionally flexible. They can handle their stress. They can move through it. They can have a tough time and they can come through it stronger. We want them to be physically resilient, right? They can hurt themselves. They can get better. They can have a cold. They can get better. They can have an illness. They can get better. The reality is that we need to carefully consider the forces at play on our particular children that are both supporting and interfering with this capacity. And that's why I call it a new era of parenting. One of your main tools for building resilience is food. And that's why we've dedicated this entire podcast to talking about feeding families. How can we use food to support our children's health? And what are some of the things we tend to fall into with food that are actually interfering with their resilience, that are actually eroding their resilience? I think sometimes it's really helpful to zoom out and take a 30,000 foot view of things, because we're stuck in the day to day, we're stuck in the stress and the chaos, and we're just trying to get our needs met and just trying to make it through our day, right? But when we take a step back and take a pause and take a breath, and we realize how amazing it is that our very fuel source, what fuels our bodies, what our bodies need and expect for health and wellness and growth, is actually growing all around us. The plants, the animals, the fungi, all of those things that we've evolved with are actually our fuel. I think it's amazing. And then when you think about it that way, it also becomes amazing to consider what we've done to that fuel supply, how we've processed it, how we have tried to speed it up, how little room we make for it, how removed we are from it, how few kids know where food comes from or how it grows or what to do with it, how to prepare it, right? How little respect we have for our farmers, the guardians of that knowledge about how to create the fuel that we need for our very survival. How little respect we have for our host, the earth, that we depend on for healthy soil and air and water that is needed to create our fuel. So this season of Feeding Families, my intention was to introduce you to new voices, new concepts, thoughts, ideas around food and around how we nourish our kids. And my hope was that you might find some ways to reconnect with food as a tool, as a force for growth and health, to remember its power and remember its influence, and to find new inspiration to make space for it and learn from it. Gosh, you guys, life gets so busy. And when life gets busy, one of the first things to go is food. I don't know if you see that in your family. I certainly see it in mine. When the calendar fills up and things get busy and budgets get tight and bandwidth gets small, we start eating terribly. It becomes really quick. It becomes on the go, in the car. I buy the cheaper stuff. And I have to take a step and remember that it's in those times of stress that we actually need to focus on nourishment. We actually need to make some room for it, because nourishing our bodies is what gives us capacity to handle stress. So the more stressed we are, the more focus on nourishment we need. So in this season, we talked about getting your kids in the kitchen with Katie Kimball of Kids Cook Real Food, right? Not only to learn the skills of cooking, but also to learn other things like critical thinking skills, participation in community, how to nourish their bodies. We talked about considering how food is a tool for connection, not only connection between people, between each other, but also how it facilitates connection within our body. We talked about that with Dr. Catherine Clinton. We talked about getting the right foods into your kids. How do you know what are the right foods and nutrients for your kids? We talked about that with Dr. Piper Gibson in terms of genetics. We talked about it with Lori Preshing in terms of the impact of food sensitivities and gauging which foods your child might be having a reaction to. We talked about it with Chef James Berry, who introduced us to the power of bringing organ meats into your diet and way you might consider doing that. I had Dr. Sheila Kilbane come, who is a pediatrician. I invited her because she works with thousands of kids and uses food as a primary tool. And I wanted her to explain about what she wants every parent to know about food and about the importance of it for kids specifically. And then we brought Susan Baker in to talk about feeding exceptional kids and how to find some balance between using food constructively and just getting through our days, finding our wiggle room and relaxing into what is real and present. Hey parents, this episode of the Feeding Families podcast is being brought to you by the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition. Whether you're looking to learn a little more about nutrition, health, and wellness, or pick up a few new recipes and cooking tips, or start a career as a holistic nutrition practitioner, there's something for everyone at CSNN. The Natural Nutrition Diploma Program is the flagship program that earns you a professional designation and title. If you just want to dip your toe in, there's the Healthy Eating and Lifestyle Certificate, the Holistic Culinary Certificate, or the Introduction to Natural Nutrition Certificate. For healthcare practitioners, CSNN offers advanced holistic nutrition workshops and certificate packages. With part-time and full-time schedules and flexible learning formats, including live online classes, there's truly something for everyone looking to improve the overall health and well-being of their family with holistic nutrition. Learn more at csnn.ca/holistic-family or follow the links in the show notes. Dr. Lauren Lax came to talk about disordered eating and how do we know whether the relationship that our kids are developing with food, which is going to be the longest relationship they will ever be in, right? It's a relationship for life. We have to make sure that that is a positive relationship. How do we know whether they're developing a positive relationship with their food? How can we cultivate that? How can we support that? What are some of the things we might do unconsciously that steer them away from a positive relationship with their food? Kathleen de Chiara came and talked about glyphosate and some of the chemicals in our food and why that's an important consideration. And then I had some guests come and talk specifically about how food can impact certain conditions. I had Dr. Gare come to talk about the impact of nutrients on concussion recovery. Jen Pike came to talk about the impact of nutrients on hormones. And Donna Kay came to talk about nutrition as it pertains to ADHD. So we covered a lot of ground this season. And it might seem like we went from here to there to here to there, but I hope that you found in there some empowerment around this tool that we make decisions about every single day. This tool that can feel so burdensome as a parent, like, oh my gosh, my kids need to eat again. They're always so hungry, right? This responsibility that we feel to nourish our kids. I hope you found some inspiration in there. But before we close out, I really want to address the elephant in the room, what I consider to be an elephant in the room when it comes to food. You know, sometimes when I go to parties or when I'm with a new group of people, when people ask me what I do for a living, I brace myself because if I say I'm a nutritionist, then all of a sudden everybody has this like, oh, did I order the wrong thing? What am I eating? What am I about to put in my mouth? Oh gosh, I should be doing this differently, right? There's this guilt and this shame around food. Sometimes I don't even talk about myself in that context anymore because I don't want people to feel that sense of shame and guilt that we have around food. Why do we do that? Why do we have a sense of guilt and shame around how we nourish our bodies, around how we nourish our kids? When I even say that to you, do you start to think, oh yeah, I'm so good at this? Or do you think, oh my gosh, we had the most terrible dinner last night. I'm so embarrassed. The sense of shame and guilt that we feel as parents around nourishment is something we need to reflect on. I don't find it to be helpful. This sense that we have as parents of not-enoughness. One thing that I've learned this year is what it feels like in my body, what the embodiment of overwhelm is. That feeling of not enoughness. I've been trying really hard to get out of my head and into my body because my body knows what's going on far before my brain can make intellectual sense of it. I think most of us are like this. So I want to know how it feels in my body when I'm dipping into overwhelm, so that I know when it's happening and I can take conscious steps to nourish myself and protect myself from crashing. For me, I feel it in my chest area. I feel a heaviness in my chest area and I feel a tightness in my throat. That's usually where I feel it first. Then I sometimes feel it in the back of my neck. Sometimes it turns into a headache. Sometimes it just feels like a little stiffness in my neck. And the other thing that I've realized about this is that I stop feeling much about my belly button. My whole lower body, I don't feel a ton there. And so I recognize this now. I've spent about a year trying to find what it is for me. And overwhelm feels differently for different people. This is how it feels for me. And so what I have to do is I have to take these conscious steps to ground myself, to reconnect with my lower body. I have to uncross my legs and put my feet flat on the floor. I need to be barefoot more often. I need to breathe. I need to focus on gratitude. I need to orient myself and remember that I'm safe. I'm okay. I have a roof over my head. I am healthy. I have to move my body. I have to integrate the bottom part of my body back into my body. Now, for some of you who are new to this kind of embodiment work, this is going to sound totally nutso to you, but this is how I catch my body, how I catch myself from when I'm going into the overwhelm of everything, of all of the things that I should be doing, that I need to do, that are being asked of me as a parent, as a human. Right? And I can reframe my thoughts and I can lift that sense of too muchness. It's a practice, it's a learning curve, and it can feel really uncomfortable at first. But if we want to be the best parents we can be, if we want to be able to make confident and bold decisions to keep our kids well and safe, if we're going to enter into this new era of parenting, right? We need to be able to feel whole ourselves. We need to know what that feels like. We need to have our feet flat on the ground. Perfection is not the goal. Learning stuff is not the goal. Our goal is to be conscious about our resources. Our goal is to take bold actions towards what we want, towards what we envision. That's the goal. Asking questions and putting support in place as we identify the need for it, that is a win. So my hope is that with this season of Feeding Families, my guests and I have helped you with that. Not that we've cluttered your life with more stuff, right? More information, more things you should be doing. No, that's not the goal here. I hope that we've helped you find a new way of thinking about food and about health, or that we validated what you already know to be true. As we round out the year, I am daring to believe that a new and a better is around the corner, right? A new something, a better something is around the corner because my goodness, it's been tough. I guess that's the optimist in me, but there's always stress before growth. There's always the need for dismantling if we want to make way for creativity. And I think that's what we're seeing now. And I think that it's up to each and every one of us to imagine what's around the corner. And I hope that your imagining will involve considering the place of food and nourishment in your life and in the life of your family, so that as we move into this new year, if it has fallen off the radar, it comes back on the radar. If life has become too busy, you find some simplicity. If you're stuck in overwhelm, that you find that embodiment, you recognize what that feels like for you so that you can become more grounded. If you're confused and you're under the weight of the too muchness, that you find the support that you need to lighten your load. So that's what I've got for you at the end of this season of Feeding Families. If you want to talk more about this, you can find me in our Raising Resilience Community Facebook group at raisingresiliencecommunity.com, or you could chat with me on Instagram at Ask Jess Sherman. And if you want to walk alongside others who are working through this shift of using food more strategically, more deliberately, more intentionally to nourish their kids and their families, you can find out how we do that at jesssherman.com/coaching. And with that, we will close out this season of the Feeding Families podcast. And I thank you so much for being here and for listening.
I'm Ransom, inspiration by an eco-parent magazine. I was on the cover of the first issue when I was a baby. My dad and the rest of the team have worked hard to bring the eco-parent podcast network to life, and I think it's pretty cool. I'd like to help out on it someday, so hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, and give this podcast a review, so that it's still around and thriving when I learn to do the audio editing. Thanks for listening. Was that good?
Yeah, you totally crushed it.